everybody, how's it going? My name is Will and welcome to Copper Jacket TV. So the Supreme Court is back in session in just a few weeks and they have some extremely important Second Amendment cases currently sitting before them. One of those cases is Duncan v. Bonta, arguably the best magazine ban case that we have ever had before the Supreme Court. If you're not aware, Duncan is a case out of the state of California that challenges their ban on magazines that can hold more than 10 rounds. Well, I was recently in California and people had questions about Duncan. One of those questions was, what happens if the Supreme Court ends up not taking Duncan? They end up denying the case. Well, we need to talk about what that process looks like and what's going to happen if they do deny Duncan, so stay tuned. Now, real quick before we get started, if you're watching this video and you've not yet subscribed, consider hitting that subscribe button. It's free, it only takes a second, but it really does help us out here quite a bit. It helps us spread our message and it lets the powers that be know that people want to see content like this, which is what allows us to stay on this platform. So thank you to everybody who subscribes up until this point. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what's going on here. Now, Duncan v. Bonta has been around for quite a while. As a matter of fact, it's been nearly a decade. This case was originally filed back in 2017 when it was Duncan v. Becerra. Now, this case was originally filed as a direct response to California's Prop 63. That was a proposition that was voted on by the people, and it was a massive gun control package. People called it Gunmageddon. That is a proposition that ended up passing. You can see the voting results of that proposition right here. And after that, several lawsuits were filed, including Duncan. Now, Duncan started off at the district court level with Judge Roger T. Benitez, also known as St. Benitez to some in California, who's responsible for California's Freedom Week, a one-week period where people could get whatever capacity they wanted in the state. And as of right now, those magazines are still completely legal to own and possess. This is a case that made it up to the Ninth Circuit, already went up to the Supreme Court once, and then after the Bruin decision was kicked back down to the Ninth Circuit, where they then kicked it back down to Judge Benitez, who started the entire process over again. Judge Benitez once again found that California's magazine ban was in fact unconstitutional, sent it back up to the Ninth Circuit, and the Ninth Circuit eventually found that California's magazine ban was constitutional. That was actually the Ninth Circuit decision that got us that famous video dissent by Judge Van Dyke, who was showing how ridiculous the Ninth Circuit's decision was, upholding California's ban. Now, we waited for a little bit and now it's gone back up to the Supreme Court. This is a case that is completely finished. It is ready to go. It is, again, the best possible chance that we have of getting a magazine ban heard by the Supreme Court. Now, what happens if the Supreme Court decides not to take it? Because historically, the Supreme Court does not take very many cases. If you guys remember, we were talking earlier, as a matter of fact, earlier this year, about Snope and Ocean State. We thought for sure they were going to take at least one of those two cases, and we followed it very closely. As those cases got conferenced about, I think at the end it was something like 13 or 14 times before the Supreme Court finally ended up denying those cases. Again, those were two great cases, but they decided not to hear them. So while we are excited, and I think that this has a great chance, we can't be sure that the Supreme Court is actually going to take it. Now, that begs the question, what happens to all of those magazines that can hold more than 10 rounds in the state of California if Duncan is denied at SCOTUS? Well, the short and simple answer to that question is, under California law, they would become illegal. Now, what's the time frame for something like that? Well, after the Supreme Court denies it, they have to send that denial back down to the Ninth Circuit, and the Ninth Circuit still has to issue a mandate, a final order on their judgment saying that California's law was constitutional. After that mandate is issued, California's law takes effect, and those magazines, again, under California law, completely unconstitutional, they would become illegal. And I think that's when all the boating accidents would start happening, and hopefully there would be mass civil disobedience, but that's pretty much what would happen. That time could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We don't know exactly how long it would take for the Ninth Circuit to actually issue that mandate. It is unlikely, but possible, that the Ninth Circuit could extend some sort of grace period, a short time period for people to come into compliance with the law. But again, that is unlikely. So again, we would have to wait for the Ninth Circuit to issue their mandate on their final judgment on California's magazine ban. Now, one thing to consider here is that if they deny it, all magazines that can hold more than 10 rounds in California would be banned. That includes magazines from the pre-banned era. There was actually once a time in California where you could get whatever capacity you wanted. When they ended up banning anything over 10, there was a grandfather clause. It allowed people to keep magazines that they had owned prior to that law taking effect. Prop 63 changed that and banned anything that people had under that grandfather clause, which I call the grandfather scheme. This would also make illegal any of the magazines that people acquired during Freedom Week. So it would be everything across the board. This would be a huge infringement on people's Second Amendment rights in that state. Not to mention, there is no way for you to get compensation for all of that money that you spent. There is no compensation listed anywhere in Prop 63. They want you to take them out of state. They want you to destroy them, turn them into, your local FFL. Either way, they don't want you to have possession of them, but California is not willing to reimburse either. And so it's basically violating not only the Second Amendment, but it's violating the takings clause as well. So as you can see, there's a lot on the line here. There's a lot riding on the Supreme Court taking this case, because if they deny it, it's going to have a major impact on tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people in the state of California, turning them into criminals practically overnight. So this is something that the Supreme Court needs to take. They need to accept this case, and they need to fix this problem that is persisting in multiple states across this country. We talk about California, but it happens in New York, New Jersey, Hawaii, in Oregon, in Washington. There are plenty of states like Colorado, which limits, I believe, to 15. I'm not sure if that recently dropped down to 10. But there are other states that limit magazines to different capacities as well. So this is huge. The outcome of Duncan could have a major effect across this country, and it needs to be taken by the Supreme Court, or else we are in a world of trouble. Again, like I was saying before, I hope that there would be mass civil disobedience, but we'll see what happens. Again, we're going to watch this one very closely to see when it gets first conferenced, and we'll see what the Supreme Court ends up doing with it. Again, we don't really know. Nobody has a crystal ball. We thought we knew what was going to happen with Snope or Ocean State, but we didn't. So we're just going to have to wait and let this one play out. But hopefully they do take it, because otherwise it's just not good news. But I wanted to answer that question for the people that asked it, and let you guys know kind of what was going on and really what's on the line here. Thank you all very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, consider hitting that subscribe button. You all have a great day.